what excites me is the things on the fringe, like what Dead Home Scarred did with 666 International, what Vebjørn Zender did, things like that was like, wow, black metal is a gateway to being able to do anything you can creatively come up with and throw it into your band. So that was what our band was about then and is still about now.
Evaporate my soul.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello there, my name is Matt. I play in a band called Void, The Unsearchable Void, and we have a new record coming out in December with Brucia Records called Jadjow. So thank you very much, Adrian, for having me on your podcast. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining me, Matt. So I'm going to ask you the question that trips up most of my interview subjects, and I'm sure you'll have a very, very in-depth answer for me. But how would you describe the music of Void? What is Void?
Void is, I don't want to say chaotic mess, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. It is a progressive metal band that has always had the idea to just do whatever comes and allow all influences and always challenging boundaries and just doing whatever feels right. So it has always been quite frantic. It is I'd say a kind of quite attention deficit band. There's always a lot of ideas thrown in there. And it's really a kind of a place where it's welcoming to throw such ideas. There's no wrong answer. And yeah, so I guess what Void is the melting pot for all of that. The influences of the people that are in the band at the various different times. And yeah, a desire to do something different and something wild.
Now, what would you say Void's relationship is with black metal?
Straight in there. Well, definitely black metal is the origin of the band. We are definitely a band that have always had our roots in black metal. A lot of people would still say that it's a black metal band. I don't personally now use that term anymore, but I don't mind people applying that moniker to this music, because obviously it has a lot of black metal tropes in there, always has. Blast beats and tremolo guitar picking being the principal features of black metal that still exist in the band today. Black metal was a fantastic inspiration and influence on the band, especially with things like the atmosphere and being able to play full chords and having, a chord that was dissonant, but playing across all the strings and being melodic as well as just rhythmical. But of course, there is a lot of influence from death metal and thrash metal as well. And then there's the influences that have always crept in from other genres. For example, on the first album, that was very much electronic music. In the second album, there was a lot of punk and hardcore influence, which went even into grind on the EP after that. The third album was very cinematic and kind of psychedelic, but they all have their black metal elements. I just am very conscious of black metal being something very important to people and how to present or identify black metal. These are not questions that I personally like to deal with, but I know that they're very important to a lot of people. So I am tentative when I say it's a black metal band. I prefer to say it's a progressive metal band that has its roots in black metal.
And the reason why I asked that question, I don't characterize your music in a way that's different from how you yourself see your music, but also because at the time we're having this conversation, I'm releasing a series of episodes with bands that either identify with or are associated with black metal. And the interesting thing about those interviews is when I ask them what black metal is, what black metal means to them, very few of them actually mention the musical elements that I personally associate with black metal, which you mentioned, which is, the dissonant chords, the tremolo picking, the blast beats, shrieking vocals, the stuff that when I was introduced to black metal, that was basically the first thing I heard. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a kind of a difference between what people would say black metal has mostly been over the years since, I don't know, since the early 90s or whatever, when I guess you could even call that the second wave, right? Euronymous' time. What black metal has been since then is not necessarily what it was at that point. I think what we're doing as a band is very much in line with what the early Norwegian bands at that time were about, which was, being different from each other, but keeping this kind of like a coherent thread of like something dark and evil. And at that time, I guess Euronymous was all about it being like satanic and that sort of thing. What black metal has been since then is there's a lot of cookie cutter bands, I think, and people saying, oh, black metal has got to be this or got to be that. But at the time, I remember a very good quote from Flaherty saying, we would be scared that Euronymous would come and like kill us in our beds because our band sounded too much like somebody else's. So they were doing their best to do something kind of like out of the box and be weird and be different. And those early bands, Dark Throne, Burzum, Mayhem, and then Dodamsgard came along, they all sounded really different. They were all doing something different. And then nowadays we have like a lot of kind of bands that sound the same. If you go to a black metal gig or a black metal festival, as I did not so long ago, it's actually quite shocking how similar the bands are. The more we move away from that early point, the more things have kind of come together rather than grown apart, which is strange. When we released Posthuman, which was our electronic crossover album, we were so excited at that time, me and Matt McNerney, thinking that we were creating a new genre of black metal and we would be kind of like a milestone in the evolution of the genre. What we realize now is it was just a freak thing that happened on the side. A footnote, in the history of black metal, a full stop in a footnote in the history, it doesn't even get mentioned or noticed as black metal progresses on largely being similar and the same, and bands that do well are, the Infernal Sea, for example, a British black metal band. They are British, I think, aren't they? Yeah. Who are like massive now and great. And I have total respect for that. But that's not the music that I like. That's not the kind of black metal that I go for. What excites me is the things on the fringe, like what Jadjow did with 666 International, what Vebjørn Zender did, things like that was like, wow, black metal is a gateway to being able to do anything you can creatively come up with and throw it into your band. So that was what our band was about then and is still about now. And
in that sense, black metal, to the individualism, the creative freedom, in many ways counter-identifying with what was popular at the time, whether it was, mainstream metal like Pantera or the more underground popular stuff like death metal and grindcore. Black metal had a lot in common with progressive metal or progressive rock, in general. When you describe your music as being progressive, would you say that is a mindset, or is there a sound associated with progressive metal?
Yeah, I think a mindset is probably the right way to describe it. It's when the music comes together, as I mentioned before, it's quite attention deficit. So ideas are brought in and then discarded in favor of something else, and always moving on, doing new things and surprising the listener. So it's progressive in that sense. It's not progressive in the sense that, I am a particularly good musician. That's never really been the case. It's just been more a mindset of like allowing anything to happen and flying in the face of convention.
And you mentioned Dodheimsgard a few times. I should point out that you yourself were a part of that band, as are some of your bandmates and collaborators.
That is how this particular lineup of Void came together, through the Dodheimsgard connection. I was never part of the band. I just played live guitar for them on one night, which is the night in 2019 when they played in London. I had heard that Camille, who now plays in Void, he was playing guitar for the Paris show the night before. And I'm in contact with Yusuf from Dodheimsgard, and I was saying how cool that was. And I made a joke that, I'm gutted that you didn't ask me. I wasn't being serious. And he just said, well, then you should do the London show, which was coming up in 3 months from that point. And somehow I managed to actually do it with no rehearsals. So that was my beginning and end of my involvement in Dead I'm Scarred that one night.
I mean, if you had to pick one band or maybe one night to be part of the Norwegian black metal scene, I think that probably would have been it, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it will. I'll never forget that. That was a major milestone musically for me and in my life as well, because it taught me that anything is possible. You know, originally when I was offered that opportunity, I thought, there's no way. How could I possibly do that? But friends told me, you know, what have you got to lose? You know, what else are you doing with your life? So I just knuckled down and I learnt the songs. And of course, aside from just that experience of playing that fantastic show, it was meeting these guys, meeting Lars and meeting George. And then that's how this record came about, because I already knew Camille via the internet. So when I spoke to Lars was like, hey, I've just quit another band. I've got some time coming up. Do you want to do a project? And I'd already been chatting to George, their sound engineer, about doing something. And so we thought, great, well, let's get Camille. He's already linked to the project. Let's get him involved as well, playing guitar. He took quite some convincing, but we got there in the end.
Well, let's go back in time, 20 years. So you mentioned post-human. You mentioned wanting to do something fresh and revolutionary in black metal and in metal, I guess, as a whole. But was that the original goal for putting together Void? Did you want to be this kind of like avant, forward-thinking black metal band?
It was definitely going to come from black metal, yes, because that's what me and Matt McNerney Kvost were both doing musically at the time, and inspired by that Dead I'm Scarred album and the Vedbjørnsender, and there were other bands around as well, like Aberim and other acts that are not coming to mind right now. But we wanted to do something where we weren't afraid to experiment in the riffs, and we weren't afraid to use effects. That talking about using effects came into the conversation right at the very beginning. So I started putting together riffs based on that remit, doing something that was kind of like weird black metal sounding, but where we used strange other alternate influences. Yeah, so right from the start, it was, let's do that. The first demo actually comes out sounding pretty black metal. It doesn't really have a lot of other effects and, you know, samples or things like that in it. But that was definitely the idea from the start.
How long would you say it took for you to find the sound that you were looking for?
I think that we just started writing the music straight away. We had the conversation and then the music just started to come. That was the kind of relationship that me and Matt McNerney had back at the turn of the millennium. He, like, for example, at one point he wanted to do a thrash band. I'm going to do a thrash band. It's going to be kind of black influenced thrash. He was inspired by Au Noir. And so great, yeah, I just got the guitar and started writing some thrashy riffs. And, you know, we'd done a 3-track demo within the next few weeks. It was called Scythe. I wonder if anybody has still got that. There's so many kind of little things that you do over the years and you wonder where they end up.
You mentioned that your songs sound like they're put together with ADHD, or that there's an ADHD feeling to them. When you're writing songs, are you consciously trying to bring together these different elements, these disparate elements, or do you have stuff pre-written that later on you decide to assemble together?
The ADHD is not something that you decide to put into the music. It comes kind of first, isn't it? And so the music ends up being written like that. So when I write riffs, when I get a part of a riff that I like, I'm already thinking about what is going to be the idea that I'm going to put in to contrast with that. And so, you know, when you listen to my riffs, they tend to be three things the same, and then the fourth one is different. That always seems to happen. I didn't choose to do that, but I get bored of the riff being the same all the way through, and then the last one, it always has to be something else. I started to realize at some point that the music could become quite incoherent, and so I've always loved about classical music. You know, with classical music, how you have a theme, and then the theme will come back in the music later, and it will come in a different form. Like a theme will enter in the melody maybe, and then later on you'll hear it as the bass line, and then you're building on that. And classical music tends to have, like in concerto sonata form or something, tend to have two contrasting ideas. You have the rhythmic idea, and then you have the melodic idea. And then they'll alternate, and then at some point you'll have the development where the ideas will come together and be explored. So coming from a classical music background, I always liked to do that with my metal music. That's always been in there since the very beginning. I've always had riffs that will come back in some other form. And we explored that a lot on Posthuman. And that's still the case now. Like on the last record, The Hollow Man, which came out during the pandemic, I took that idea to the extreme, where the entire album has themes that continuously come back across the different songs. Like the last song and the first song share a lot of themes, although they're in different time signatures and they sound very different. But melodic passages will come back to constantly remind of what's been before, but yeah, they'll develop and morph. It's always been something that I've liked to play with. Working with the guys on this Jadjow one has been very interesting because for the first time, well, not for the first time, so that's wrong to say, but I got these guys, Camille and Lars, and also George, I got them to write songs as well. So they created the bass, and then I put my things on top. So the first thing I started to do with their music was to find ways that I could link things that they had done that weren't otherwise linked, which you can hear a lot in the song on the new album, Only For You, which was originally by Camille. It's his guitar part that started that song. So I felt like my job was with the vocal and my guitar to create parts that kind of brought it all together, because his music is not like that. His music is like a maelstrom of like there's more, and now it's something different, and now there's something else. So my job was try to kind of link it all together with some thematic chain.
So how did these songs come together? Were you guys trading files back and forth?
Yes, it was all done over the internet, this album. It was a pandemic album. So I created my riffs and I sent them to them without any instruction. And they created their parts. And sometimes I created the vocal first before I'd heard their parts. Sometimes I did it afterwards. And then I said to them, everybody should have a song. And I did the same on their music like they'd done on mine. So it was a lot of fun, that. It was just throwing files out and having no idea what you were going to get back. And it was very productive. Like the songs started to come together very quickly, which is why really it became the new Void album rather than it being another band, because of how the previous lineup of Void didn't survive the pandemic, let's say. We all got separated. We all ended up living in different cities. We couldn't connect together like we had been doing. And instead I was doing these songs with these guys. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna release this as the new Void album now, because we are making something. And what could be more healthy for a band than having a new album, right?
So when you say that the previous Void lineup didn't survive the pandemic, does that mean that you guys were or needed to write in a room together or be in constant contact to create songs?
That lineup had become really good at doing shows, at playing gigs. It had become very much more about playing live, and writing new music together was not easy. I did a lot of the Hollow Man, I just did it on my own, and the other guys did contribute riffs and they went into the songs, but I wrote and arranged the whole thing kind of alone, and then had them come in and record their parts. It was quite difficult, because before the pandemic, for the White album, which is the second album, we had been a rehearsal room band, and we would get together, me and Joe Burwood, the drummer, and later Rob Archibald on bass, and we would just write the music there together. We would start playing and very often hit record, and very often that would be like, oh, here comes a new song, guys, And that was not happening in the later iteration of that lineup. It simply wasn't possible to get together in the room like that. People just didn't have that amount of free time. And it became harder and harder to get everybody together with everybody's, different lives and different jobs and living in different cities. So it was more about getting together and playing shows, which was great, but we weren't moving forward. We didn't have any new material. So we kind of got a bit stuck. And then when I did the Jadjow show, I started working with these other guys. New material was just coming so thick and fast. So it was like, it was really refreshing. Sadly, now it means that I lost the live lineup that I had, and now I've got a new album with these fantastic musicians who are all living in different countries. So we've never even been in the same room together. So although we got a lot of good new music, you know, we definitely lost something of what the band was before.
So as you mentioned, the new Void album is called Jadjow.
Yes.
And it will be released on the 7th of December through Brusha Records.
That is correct.
Let's start with the title,
Yes.
Jadjow. What does that refer to?
Like many things on this album, the title was a joke. It was a working title. Just we needed to call it something. And Jadjow, actually, I probably shouldn't say this. Like, how I'm going to come up with a fake story. Actually, Jadjow was a name that my daughter, when she was a toddler, had for the playground. And she would say that she wanted to go, Daddy, Jadjow, that she wanted me to take her to the playground. And so when we were creating this new music, it was so fun just throwing in ideas. We had this idea that, like, it's a playground, we can do whatever we want. There's no barrier. So that was like a placeholder. And like many placeholders, it just stuck. It's the same with several of the song titles. They were originally just jokes. They were just placeholders, and then they just stuck. It's actually been the case with previous records as well. When Levi did the vocals for the tape, which was the Unsearchable Riches of Void EP, Levi LeBlanc was the vocalist for that one. And we'd just put like a silly placeholder title for each of the 4 songs. And he just took those and wrote the lyrics about that. So those placeholders ended up staying. He just turned the one word into kind of like a phrase, like a 6 word, whatever. He expanded on it and turned it into a whole concept. It's kind of like a common theme in the band that, you know, no idea is a bad idea. And ideas go in and they develop, they grow like mold, and they become something so much more than how they began.
So we talked about how you met Lars and some of your other collaborators from playing with Dotheimsgard. How did you know that these were the guys that you wanted to write an album with?
Well, the experience of playing with that band was fantastic. And Lars is such an accomplished musician. He's also a really easygoing guy. So easy to work with and so creative. And when he asked me, do you want to do something together? It was like, well, yeah, definitely. There's no doubt about that. And I was getting on really well with George, their sound engineer. So it was already happening that during the pandemic, I had started to write new songs, and I was just sending them back and forth with George, and he started programming the drums on them. And it was like, oh, well, Lars came and said, let's do something. And I said, well, me and George are already doing something, so get on this. So the next stage was who's going to play guitar, and Camille was the obvious choice there.
You described the composition process, how the songs came together for this album. And it sounds like a very free-form, open way of writing songs. But how do you know when a song is done in this process? When were you happy with what you had?
Oh, it's hard to say, isn't it? I guess when the tank is empty. Some of them start from a place and circle round and then come back, like the first single, Self-Isolation. But most of them, it's like the music starts and you're laying down ideas, and one idea will inspire another. And by writing a riff, it inspires another riff. And eventually you get like a nice round package. It's hard to say. There's never been like, it should be this long, or, you know, it needs to have a slow section and a fast section, and it needs to go through this. There's never been any of that really with this band. It's always been, I don't know, that like the songs write themselves. I think this is probably why there are such massive gaps between the albums. They come in like a frenzy of music writing. There's a frenzy of songwriting, of riff writing. at a time when, for me anyway, I mean, it's different for the other guys, but for me, I get really into playing the guitar in like a chapter of my life, and I'll just churn out loads of riffs and programming drums and, mapping the crazy time signatures and, just having fun. When you've had fun and you listen through and you say, yeah, that's a piece of music, it's ready, it's done. I don't usually edit things, cut sections out, add things in later. It's normally just like the product of a moment in time, a frenzy, like a train of thought that just runs until it crashes. So that's not a very clearly mapped out formula, is it?
I mean, it sounds like, for some songwriters, it's, either the song is done or they're done, right? Like there's a point where you can't add or change anything to the song anymore. You just have to leave it alone.
Yes. And in the case of our band, I think that time probably came when we ought to have left it alone a long time before we did in several cases, which has resulted in some pretty bizarre and overlayered music. But, it is what it is, the Hollow Man especially, we just kept adding more. That was the one where I started, a friend gave me his plugin of an orchestral suite. I was like, great, well, this is going to be the album that has orchestra on it. And I just couldn't stop playing with it. It was like, you hear a melody inside another melody, and you'd be like, oh, that could be the French horn, or the strings can come in now, and I've got a melody on the guitar, and when the guitar stops playing it, well, the violin will take it over, or I'll put a flute in or something. It's too much, but I can't say that I would have done it any other way because it was just so fun to make. And it was a case of like, for a period of several months, staying up until 3, 5, 6 in the morning, just on a high, just layering up new things,
That feeling when Lucifer died, that moment when you're losing your mind, the lost have forgotten their lives. In darkness the loneliness thrives. Nobody wants to make
Was this a fun album to work on?
Jadjow was, yeah, it was extremely fun. There were two things about it that were my favorite things. The first thing was sending out my guitar parts just alone, soloed, to a map to a click track, and then hearing what the other guys were gonna do with that. That was just so exciting. It's something that hadn't really been the case before in the band. I'd never been able to send something to somebody else in the band and then get back something else. Previously, it had been like, I've done this, and then they would come over and we'd work on it together and we'd gradually hammer it out. But this was like, I would do my bit, I would send it, and when it came back, it had become something else. Like, it had grown another limb, and I had no idea what that limb was going to do. So that was extremely exciting. And every time I got files from one of the other guys, it was like a new kind of highlight and a massive kind of influx of joy to be able to listen to that. The other thing about that album that was really, really fun is that because I took over on the vocals, I gave myself free rein to do whatever I wanted. And that was, I ditched metal vocals largely, not completely, but I wanted to be dropping metal vocals as a dynamic thing. And in those few moments when it was impossible to create a melodic line over something so heavy and furious. But because I was doing a lot of melodic vocals, I was overlaying the vocals in stacks and doing harmonies. And that, I think that was probably the most fun I've ever had doing music on my own, was layering up those harmonies, just to seeing what would come out. If you haven't ever played that game, I really recommend it because it is so much fun.
So I usually ask a band how they compare their latest album with their previous work. But I think in this case, what I'm curious about is, considering this is a new lineup that you hadn't worked with previously, and that they came up with a lot of the, at least some of the initial ideas for the songs. What keeps this Void? What makes this a Void album?
What makes it a Void album is the fact that I am playing metal music. To me, that's what Void is. Originally, it could well have been another band, but why have another band when the music is coming from the same place? It's the same style. For me, this is what I wanted to do with the sound of the band. I wanted for a long time to move away from being stuck with metal vocals. So that's the major difference from previous Void stuff, but it's still very much Void because that's what I've always wanted to do with that sound. I think when you go to live shows, metal music, extreme metal music, can be a real maelstrom of sound. What I've noticed since the pandemic is the quality of live sound in shows. I don't know if it's my hearing or the fact that I'm just getting older, but I'm really struggling to pick out the kind of the core of the music. And our music is particularly chaotic. There's often layers of ideas, more than one thing going on at the same time. Things don't stick around for a long time before something else happens. And I became very conscious of the fact that metal vocal is creating like a white noise, a noise element over the top of something that's already very noisy. When your music is quite straightforward and down to earth, and when the riffs are easy to identify, that can still very much be black metal, right? And I think that's great, and I have respect for that. But that's not what this music does. So I always thought, with so much chaos, we had, with a record like The Hollow Man, we had maybe created like chaos on top of chaos by putting in these very extreme vocals. And I really enjoyed the melodic vocal passages. So I really wanted to evolve the band in that direction, where, for example, at a live show, you can really identify melodic phrases more easily. So there's something actually to listen to. So yeah, it for me, it's very much still Void, but it's the evolution of that.
It seems like from the very beginning, you were not content with doing what either other people had done before or what you yourself had done before. With this evolution in mind, we talked about progressive rock and progressive metal and where Void fits into that. Did you see yourself someday reaching a point where you're making music like Jadjow?
I had hoped that it would come to this. I mean, actually, I thought that maybe for the future of Void, it might have even dropped yet more blast beats. Because once again, that's another thing where you have this kind of maelstrom of sound. So it can be quite difficult when there's blasting going on to discern what's happening. I notice this a lot when I'm at live shows. When blast beats are going on, it's very difficult, even on record, right, to balance a blast beat. And even some of the greatest metal albums, I remember listening to Beneath the Remains, for example, when I was like 14 or something. And, in some of the blast beats, I was like, we were kind of like, it's really weird. Like, what's actually happening there? Like, where is the beat? Or like, where is the emphasis of the beat? And these are like, that's like a fucking milestone of metal. So I think probably in the future, if I do get round to doing another metal album, another Void album, then it might move in that direction to have less blasting. But yeah, I mean, definitely I wanted to do something more melodic and kind of more... I mean, I couldn't have imagined what you say, oh, did I imagine it sounding like this? But I couldn't have imagined what Lars and Camille were going to do. They really added something that was totally unexpected and joyous for me. And as well, Tarek later on. Oh, Tarek played on what George had composed. But because it was a live performance instead of programming, George couldn't do the live drums because of the pandemic. He was even moving country, so in the end, it was taking too long. So we got Tarek to do it because he had his home studio, he had everything set up, and he added in something so progressive. The way that guy plays drums is like quite unbelievable. It's like inhuman. And what Camille was doing on the guitar is very often, if I'm playing a riff, I'm playing a thrash riff. If I had written the second guitar part myself, it would have been similar to what the first one was doing and creating some kind of harmony. There might be a higher one and a lower one. But if it's a trempic riff, it's a trempic riff, But when I'm playing a thrash riff in Iniquitous Owl, he's doing like kind of like harmonics and noise over the top. It's like, I never would have thought of that, man. Give me like 5 years to make the album. I never would have been able to come up with what he did. So at some point he was saying when George was unable to get into a studio to do the drums, Camille was saying, well, I'll do the drums and we'll get another guitarist. And I was like, no, it's not going to work. Well, it could have worked, but I don't want that. I mean, it's got to be him on guitar. And again, the same with Lars. I couldn't have expected what he was doing. A bass player will normally follow what the guitar does, and then they might have some sections where the bass comes forward. But the way Lars plays the bass is he's following what the guitar does, but he's also creating his own melodic part as well. So he's not afraid to not play on the root note, for example. Metal bassists always start on the root note. Starting on the root note is actually kind of like I think a failing of modern metal, being stuck on the root note. When I go to see bands nowadays, sometimes I'm like, I'm struggling to get into it. And at that point, I think, is it just E and F? Is it just like, and then all the drops are E.
Right.
And I'm like, guys, it's like, 30, 40 years ago, we nailed this. but that's me, right? There's nothing wrong with that music. That's me just not getting it, I guess.
I mean, there is a point where you hear the same Slayer riff over and over again. You hear the same Death riff over and over again, where you do, I don't know how many times I've heard Left Hand Path in the last 10 years, where, you just feel like, come on, like, did you really think you're adding anything new to this? But I also have to admit that when I was 18, 19, that was exactly what I was trying to write. I was trying to write my own Angel of Death. I was trying to write my own, Drowned or Left Hand Path or whatever. And I think like it's you need to give everybody like 2 or 3 albums to like figure out who they are beyond, the death metal album or the black metal album that they just got and that they're super excited about.
Absolutely. But people don't have to do something different. Why should they? Everybody deserves the right to make the music that improves their life, right? So when people want to play that kind of music, they can start a band and they can do it. And people will come and watch them and drink some beers and have a good time. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's that's just not what I'm doing, but it doesn't mean that people should do this. I think, this is always going to be a bizarre thing that happened on the fringes. It's never going to be the kind of thing that people generally go for.
Did everyone record their parts remotely at their own home setup?
Yes, they did. Yes, everybody recorded in their own home studios. And amazingly enough, Tarek actually played the drums on top of what had been done. He was the last person to add it. He's such an amazing musician that it doesn't sound like that. The BPM track, because everything's recorded to a click,
Right.
but the click is programmed to be constantly changing in tempo to give it that, still, so it can still have organic feel. And he just dropped his drums over the top. He never asked, can you flatten? Other drummers that I have worked with have said, well, this section, you can't have 52 BPM into 53 and then 57 and then jumping around like that. You have to just flatten that section out. He never said that for a second. Can you change anything? No, he just was able to somehow organically get the feel of the nonsense that we had done. So that's quite amazing. That's I think to be able to do like remote recording like this really requires some tip-top musicians, Luckily, I was the first person to play in most of the cases, not all of them, but in the majority of the cases I played first. So I didn't have the issue of trying to match what other people had done. I just did mine bit first and they matched to me. So I was very, very lucky there. I'm definitely the worst musician in the band.
With everybody tracking their own parts separately, who brought it all together?
They would send it to me and I built the songs on my computer, but I didn't mix it. I did try to mix it at first, and there were a lot of considerations, and a lot of people had, they wanted this thing changing, and for me it was like, oh, that will unbalance that, and I just got so stressed because I was so close to the music, and I loved the demos the way that they were. And so in the end, I just put up my hands and said, okay, I can't mix this. I can't make everybody happy. It's too frustrating. And then we found this guy at Heldscaler Studio and Raf, and he just basically took what we had created and moved it on to the next step. He didn't do anything with the production that made it sound different to what it already was. He just kind of balanced the elements and finished it for us and made it sound better. And it was such a relief working with him, because previously when we discussed mixing with other people, there'd been talk of, getting the DI guitars and reamping things and, triggering this and that. And it was like, no, no, that's not what we've done. We loved the demo so much that in the end, the demo just grew into the album.
And I should mention that you yourself are an audio engineer, right? You work professionally as a...
Yes, I'm an audio engineer. Yeah, I used to work recording music, but now I'm working in film.
Had you worked with Raf Henry before?
No, he is a friend of Camille's, and in fact, Camille was the guy who brought him in and Tarek in, and also the mastering engineer Benoit Roux. They're all Camille's contacts. I'm always switching between calling him Camille, which is what I've always called him, and Camille, which is the way that you should be able to say it, but I didn't realize until recently. I'm constantly stumbling on this.
Were you nervous at all working with Raf for the first time?
I wasn't nervous, no, because I didn't have to do anything. My work was all done.
Sure.
So it was great working with him because he took over at the point where we'd expended all of our energy into the thing, and we were entering a phase of confusion and wondering, how do we bring it together? How do we finish this? And he came in with so much enthusiasm. He was a wonder to work with. I highly recommend him. When you're in a band, you have your group chat on the internet, and because we were an international band, our group chat was really the only form of communication that we had. And ours had kind of like gone, like the fire had gone out, we were wandering around in the dark. And then we made a new group chat with him, and he just brought life back into the project by being so enthusiastic, and, he just really got it. when I sent him so many layers of vocals, I was nervous about that. I was thinking, how is he possibly going to understand how I want those vocals to be balanced? I've got all these different harmonies, and some of the layers of vocals, actually, if you solo them, they actually sound really awful. But they, in the blend, they're doing a job, like the falsetto ones at the top and the very low ones. They do a job, but if you listen to them on their own, you'd be like, oh my God, that's not music. What the hell is that guy doing? And he just said, don't worry, I'm just gonna have a go myself, and then you tell me if you think that I've got it. Well, he got it.
And you mentioned Benoit was someone else that came in via Camille's recommendation.
Yes. Actually, Raph and Benoit, they have always worked together, I think.
Okay.
I think that Benoit taught Raph a bunch of stuff back in the day and kind of got him into certain things. I'm not exactly sure the history there, so I don't want to say something that is inaccurate. But for him, the natural progression was, if he's done the mix, he'll pass it on to that guy. So it was a good flow.
We spoke about how the previous lineup was mainly a live lineup, and your current lineup is spread out throughout the world. What does that mean in terms of your ability to play shows or maybe festivals next year?
We are working on that. It's very important to try to make this happen. So we are trying one particular drummer that we are trying now. It's a lot of music to learn, right? So bringing anybody new into the project is going to be a real head do's. And there's a lot of work. For example, today I've been spending the day cutting up the old songs and doing like tempo maps and things to create click tracks, which some of the time just doesn't make sense at all. I was doing one here today, the Horrid Lover, the Scrum Scrubber from the EP. It starts off at 273 BPM and then goes down to 255, then jumps to 280. And at one point the computer was saying, no, the resulting tempo is 338. I'm like, yeah, that's it, man. It's just, trust in that. So it's going to be real hard to bring in somebody new to try to understand that. But again, Camille's on it, and he's working with a new drummer to try to make that happen. So we are looking forward to having another go at doing live. And for me, it's going to be, awesome to get back on the stage again. So I'm really looking forward to that. I will go and rehearse with them. They're in Dublin, so I'll go and rehearse with them. And then we'll fly Lars over when we're ready, and just do it like that. The way that I did it when I played with Dudimsgard, I learnt their songs on my own to the click track, and then I just turned up on stage and played. I never would have thought that could be something that people do, but it's changed my perception of what's possible, right? Book the gig and it will happen.
So by the time people hear this podcast, Jadjow will be out through Brochure Records. Matt, please tell people how they can order the album. What's the best way to get it?
Right. Well, on Brochure Records' Bandcamp right now, you can already pre-order the album, which is brochurerecordsbandcamp.com/album/Jadjow. Jadjow. Sorry, Jadjow. Yeah, so you can pre-order it already. And when it comes out, then you'll be able to get it from us as well. And we are the Unsearchable Void. That is the moniker to be able to find a band which has the most generic band name ever. There must be more bands called Void than any other band. So if you type in The Unsearchable Void, you will find us. TheUnsearchableVoid.com is our website. Facebook is The Unsearchable Void as well. And we'll be posting all about the record as it progresses on our Facebook and Instagram and our website, The Unsearchable Void.
Now, are you guys planning on doing any vinyl releases or anything like that?
Well, I've got so many of the copies of the Hollow Man on vinyl stacked up on top of my wardrobe that I don't think the structural integrity of the woodwork will be able to take any more boxes of vinyl. So no, we're not going to do that. I can understand the glory of vinyl, and it was a great milestone to be able to bring out the Hollow Man on vinyl. But the number of people who asked, haven't you got it on CD? We just decided, why spend so much money to create a product that, it's sitting here. I think it would be great if we were playing live more regularly to have those vinyl, but we'll see in the future. When we get the live lineup together and we're out there rocking festivals and shows, maybe we'll press it on vinyl. But for now, it's just going to be CD.
Is there anything else you want to say?
I want to say thank you very much. I really appreciate what guys like you, and you in particular, are doing for the scene. It really means a lot, when you put so much effort and work into creating a piece of art, when it's off the wall, or it's not for everybody. It's something quite crazy. And there's somebody who gets in touch with you and says, hey, would you like to come and talk about it? It really means a lot to me. It really means a lot to bands like us. And without guys like you, the scene would just die. So thank you so much for all of the work that you do.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, maybe this is a good time to say something about Brucia Records. I don't actually know anything about them. One of the promotional companies that I work with, or that works with me, has been sending me their music, and I find them to be quite interesting in terms of the type of bands that they release. It's not straightforward black metal bands or straightforward doom metal bands. It's always a little bit on the off the wall side, a little bit on the avant-garde or progressive side.
Yeah.
And so I pay a lot of attention to what comes out on that label. And I'm embarrassed to say that I wasn't familiar with Void before this, but when I saw that the album was coming out on Brucia, I knew it was something I had to check out and pay attention to. And so I'm glad that they sent me the album, and I'm glad that we were able to connect and talk about it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm really glad that the connection with them is bringing more people to us as well. We were very lucky because with this label, they came to me and said, we want to do something with you. I don't know what it's going to be, but, if you want to do a different version of the Hollow Man, or you want to, whatever you want to do, let's do something because we really like your band. And having just come out of the experience of, nailing the internet with 1 million emails saying, hey, our band is back after another massive hiatus. Pay attention to us and sign us to your label, It was great to have somebody actually come to us and say, we want to, they were the ones who were asking rather than we were asking. So it was like, this is a brilliant way to go about it. And there was some doubt from some people that this small label was going to be able to deal with us. And I got to say, we haven't been disappointed at all. They have been so on it since the first day when we decided to go with them. It's the first time we've ever actually signed a proper contract because we were able to constantly be in communication with them, and they've just really been looking after us. It's so nice to have dialogue with a couple of guys who are into what you're doing, who are encouraging you to do more. And, they're just really pulling their weight. They're just doing a lot of work for us. So, definitely Brucia Records. Big shout to them.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you, sir.